There are men who carry their wars home in their hands and never once set them down. Not in the years that follow, not when the children come, when the photographs fade at the edges, when the body slows and the world grows quieter. The weight does not ease with age. It only learns to be still, waiting in the dark hours, waiting in the silence between a man's last waking thought and the cold that finds him before dawn. I have sat in this chair for 50 years with something I could not name aloud. Tonight, I am going to name it. There are memories that do not fade. They do not soften because a man grows old, learns to smile for photographs, or sits by a warm fire while the house settles around him. They wait, quietly, patiently, and when the room is still enough, they return exactly as they were, cold, sharp, unforgiving. You once asked why I wake before dawn even now. Why I sit in the dark with an empty cup, listening to the furnace as if I am waiting for something. I told you old men sleep lightly. I told you war teaches that. True enough, but not the whole truth. I wake at that same hour because that was the hour the night finally broke, and before it broke I did something I never told another soul. It was December 1944, deep in the Ardennes, when the cold had teeth and the trees looked like black bones against a hard sky. Snow had been falling on and off for 2 days, not enough to soften anything, just enough to turn the roads slick and the fields ghostly. We had been pushed into a small Belgian village of stone houses, frozen wells, narrow lanes, and one church steeple standing over everything like a warning. By then we knew winter could kill without firing a shot. Men lost feeling in their feet and pride in the same week. We slept in bursts, ate what we could heat, and moved like old machinery. But that night felt wrong from the start. The village was too still. The dogs had stopped barking. Even the men who joked through shelling had gone quiet. I was 21 and assigned to 2nd Platoon Fox Company. Back then I still believed fear came in one shape. I thought a man knew it when it arrived. I had not yet learned that the worst fear often comes dressed as duty and asks you to make a choice before you understand what it will cost. Beside me in that village was Tommy Doyle, and if ever I had a brother not born into my mother's house, it was Tommy. Tommy was from South Boston with a crooked grin and a voice that made even complaints sound cheerful. He carried a photograph of his wife in his breast pocket and unfolded it so often the edges had gone white. Mary Doyle, dark hair, bright eyes, one hand resting on a round belly. The baby was due in February, and Tommy had already decided it was a girl. Claire, he said. That evening we were posted around a half-ruined farmhouse at the edge of the village, covering the road through the trees. Sergeant Hale split us into pairs along the wall, garden, stable, and lower windows. Lieutenant Mercer believed the Germans were probing for a weak point before dawn. We had a field phone back to an observation team near the church, a crate of grenades, 2 belts of machine gun ammo, and the sort of confidence men pretend to have when the line is too thin to discuss. Just after dark, Tommy and I took the stable side. The roof had been split by shelling, and snow drifted through in fine ribbons. An old cart lay on its side, broken harness hung from a peg. The air smelled of hay, smoke, and animal ruin. We sat with rifles over our knees, listening to the wind scrape the boards. Then Tommy tapped his breast pocket and whispered, "When I get home, Joe, I'm never sleeping cold again." I smiled and told him that when I got home I was going to sit in a barber's chair for an hour and let a man fuss over me like I was made of glass. That was the sort of talk men had then, not because we were sure of home, but because naming it kept it alive. For a while we traded those little plans. Eggs fried in butter, a hot bath, clean sheets. Then Tommy stared through the crack in the wall and said, "Funny thing is, I don't think it's dying that scares me anymore. I think it's leaving things unfinished." I should have answered him. Instead, we heard boots beyond the hedgerow, slow and careful, and all the small human talk in us shut off like a lantern cut by a hand. A minute later, a flare climbed over the trees and burst white above the road, turning the snow bone bright. The village flashed into view, the stone wall, the trough, the steeple, the bare orchard, the low smoke. Then darkness swallowed it again. The first shots came from the north lane, short testing bursts. Then a shouted warning. Then a mortar round punched the night open. The farmhouse shook. Plaster dust rained down. Men started yelling positions. Hale ordered us to hold fire until we had shapes. We crouched at the stable opening and watched the road, hearts beating so hard it felt wasteful. The Germans did not rush us all at once. They came in pieces using darkness, snow, and confusion. A shadow at the wall, a movement near the cart path, a helmet where no stone should have been. We fired, and they answered, and the night broke into fragments that never stitched back together. Rifle cracks, splintered wood, men calling for ammo. Someone screaming for a medic. Once, between bursts, I heard the church bells trembling from the concussions, not ringing, just shivering in their frame. Tommy was beside me through the first part of it. He fired clean and steady, talked only when needed, and twice caught what I missed. Once he yanked me down just before a bullet smashed the plank where my head had been. We laughed after that, the ugly laugh men give death when it reaches and misses. But by midnight the stable wall was coming apart, and the machine gun team in the garden had gone silent. Hale sent Tommy with a message to Mercer. Enemy slipping in from the east lane, ammunition low, request immediate artillery if the line bent any further. Tommy looked at me once before he ran. It was a strange look, not frightened exactly, but searching, as if he wanted me to hold on to his face for him. He slapped my shoulder, ducked through the side gap, and vanished into snow and smoke. That was the last ordinary moment of my life. 10 minutes passed, then 15. No sign of him. The field phone was dead. Mercer had not answered the last 2 calls. Another mortar struck the back of the house and set part of the roof burning. Hale took stone fragments in the arm and neck, though he stayed upright by stubbornness alone. The Germans pressed closer. One grenade came through the stable split and landed in the hay, but by some mercy it rolled into a damp patch and the blast was half swallowed. When the smoke cleared, Hale grabbed my coat and told me to find Tommy or Mercer or anyone still breathing near that church. I ran bent double through a yard littered with broken fencing and frozen cabbages. The snow was grey from soot, and every doorway looked occupied by death. A barn on the left was burning low and red. I passed one of our boys face down in the lane and nearly stumbled over a German no older than 16 with his eyes open to the sky. Beyond them the church square looked like judgment after the fact, an overturned wagon, stained snow, bits of glass glittering where the windows had blown in. I found Mercer near the church wall with half his face blackened by powder and his leg bound thick with cloth. The observation team was gone, 1 dead, 1 missing. The radio had been smashed by shrapnel. Mercer pulled a folded map from inside his coat and shoved it into my hand. Pre-registered artillery coordinates were marked around the village, including one directly over the East Lane and Stable Road. If they break through there, he said, call Red Sparrow. No delay. No heroics. Then quieter, your runner made it part way. He's down behind the mill wall. I do not remember deciding to go. The mill wall stood behind the orchard, where the lane dipped and the drainage ditch widened. Firelight from the farmhouse made the snow pulse orange and black. I could hear machine gun bursts from inside the village itself. That meant the line had folded somewhere. I crossed the orchard low, branches scraping my helmet, and called Tommy's name only once, because after that the answering fire told me better. I found him behind a collapsed section of stone wall beside the mill race. At first I saw only one hand, glove torn, fingers flexing weakly against the snow. Then I saw the rest of him. A timber beam had fallen across his legs, pinning him from the thighs down. There was blood frozen black on his coat and more under him. His rifle lay beside him empty. When he turned and saw me, his mouth twitched into something that wanted to be a grin and failed. "Hell of a walk," he said. I dropped beside him and tried the beam at once, stupid with hope. It did not move. I dug at the snow, braced my back, pushed until my vision sparked, and got nothing for it except pain. Tommy hissed and caught my sleeve. "Leave it," he said. "Listen to me." I told him to shut up. I told him I would get Hale, get 2 men, get anyone. He shook his head and looked past me toward the village. I followed his eyes. Shapes were moving along the east lane. Not many yet. A patrol, maybe. More would come behind them. If they got through that cut by the mill race, they would be inside the village centre in minutes, behind what was left of our line. Mercer had been right. The artillery had to fall there, right there on the lane, the wall, the ditch, the stable road. On Tommy. He knew it too. I could see it settle between us like another kind of snow. I told him I could drag him clear, that maybe the barrage could be shifted north. He almost smiled. "Joe," he said, and the softness in his voice terrified me more than the gunfire. "Look at me." I did. You know they won't stop if they get in. Hale's got civilians in the cellar. You know what comes after." I said nothing. I could not. Tommy fumbled inside his coat and pulled out Mary's photograph, her hand on her stomach. That brave little smile. He held it toward me, but his hand shook, so I took it. "If you get home first," he said, "tell her I was thinking of her. Tell her I was thinking of the baby." Then he swallowed. "Tell Claire I guessed right. I tried the beam again because a man will lie to his own eyes when his heart begs him to." Still nothing. Behind us, near the orchard, a German voice called out. Another answered. Tommy heard them too. He reached for my wrist, and when his fingers closed on me, I felt how cold he already was. "Call it," he whispered. I told him I could not. He shut his eyes for a moment, then opened them and said the thing that has lived in me ever since. "If you leave me here for them, it won't end here. Son, there are sentences that divide a life into before and after. That was one of them." We both understood. Capture was not mercy. Fire was spreading from the shattered shed. Even if I moved the beam, he would bleed out before I got him back. The patrol was 50 yards away, maybe less. The artillery code sat folded in my pocket like judgment. Tommy asked me for the photograph again. I gave it to him. He looked at Mary for one long second, pressed the picture to his lips, then tucked it back against his heart. "Don't let them take me," he said. My hands had been steady through shelling, ambushes, river crossings, and hunger. They were not steady then. I remember pulling my pistol because it was closer than the rifle. I remember telling him no. I remember him saying my name the way a brother does when he needs you to stop being afraid. Then I heard the church bell tremble again. I held his shoulder so he would not be alone at the last. I told him Mary would know he loved her. I told him his little girl would know too. He nodded once. There were tears in my eyes, but not in his. He looked toward the dark village and said almost gently, "Do it before I lose my nerve." So I did. The sound was small, smaller than all the sounds around us. A life can end with hardly any noise at all. His body jerked once, then settled. My hand was still on his shoulder when the warmth started leaving him. I do not know how long I knelt there, but the German voices were closer now, and the world, indifferent as ever, kept moving. I ran back toward the church wall with Tommy's blood on my glove and the artillery code in my fist. Mercer was half conscious when I reached him. I shouted Red Sparrow and the coordinates until he heard me, then he relayed it through a backup line patched from a cellar window. We waited less than a minute, though it felt like waiting for the sky to choose a side. The first rounds came in hard on the east lane, walking through the mill wall, the ditch, the orchard edge, and the stable road. Stone, earth, flame, men, timber, everything rose together in one black wave. The German patrol vanished inside it. More rounds followed, tightening the road until no one could have crossed alive. By dawn, the attack had broken. Relief armor reached us after first light. At dawn, I walked back to the mill wall, though every step felt borrowed. The barrage had chewed the lane into a trench of broken stone and black ice. Trees were split, the ditch steaming, the air thick with cordite and plaster dust. There was no patrol anymore, only pieces of uniforms, shattered rifles, and a silence so complete it felt staged. I found the place where Tommy had been by the beam and the scorched patch beneath it. The photograph was gone. Maybe the fire took it. Maybe the blast carried it into the orchard. For years I preferred to imagine Mary's face rising with the smoke, going somewhere no shell could reach. I knelt there long enough for my knees to numb. Then I took Tommy's dog tags from the snow and closed my fist around them until the edges cut my palm. That little pain mattered to me. It meant I was still in the world he had saved, and not yet buried under the same cold silence that had taken him. The army wrote that Corporal Thomas Doyle was killed by enemy shelling while carrying a message under fire. That part was close enough to live on paper. I let it stand. I stood beside his grave marker later and said nothing. I wrote Mary a letter with careful hands and told her Tommy had been brave, loyal, and thinking of home at the end. That was true. It was also a coward's version of the truth. I told myself for years that silence was kindness. What good would it have done to give a widow one more horror to carry? What good would it have done a daughter to know her father's last breath came by a friend's hand? Maybe that was mercy. But if I am honest, mercy was not the only thing in it. There was shame too, and a part of me still hears that shot and wonders whether I had any right at all.